Okay, so the next area that we're going to look at is color theory, and in particular, how color theory relates to styling. Color theory is a pretty deep subject, and some people spend their entire career just focusing on color theory and nothing alone. I'm not talking about as a photographer, but as a colorist, the person that edits the sort of look, the color of a film. Now, don't be overwhelmed. You don't need to know as much as them, but obviously, I'm just trying to communicate that it is quite a deep subject. And if color is something that you're really interested in, that you think is going to be important to your work or to your brand, to your business, I would recommend going away and doing some external reading to try and learn in more depth about color theory. Or maybe you just find it interesting. Personally, I find it very fascinating. So color theory is the science/art of using color effectively in visual design. So that includes branding, photography, styling, graphic design, cinema, but also interior design, even urban planning. So it's about trying to help you understand how one color interacts with another, or how several colors come together to create a palette, and why one palette or why one combination might work and why another one doesn't. Then finally, it's about understanding how different colors make people feel and combine them in ways that convey a particular emotion or a range of emotions. So why is it important to use color theory in our work? Colors culturally carry an emotional weight to them. This is actually different depending on what country you live in, but it's relatively true across all Western countries that we perceive certain colors in the same. So understanding that colors carry certain emotion makes us realize what is and isn't appropriate in the story that we want to tell. It's also important stylistically to just make sure that things look visually pleasing and they're not offensive to our eye. If we think back to learning about balance in composition, there's a certain amount of balance that's required in choosing our color or in color theory. And then finally, colors are just a fantastic way to help tell the story that we're trying to tell. And being consistent with colors across all of our imagery is really important in making sure that we convey a consistent aesthetic across our brand, and therefore enhancing the actual brand itself. So when I'm setting out on starting a new campaign for a client or for myself in my own personal work, one of the first things that I do as part of my brief or as part of my proposal is I'll actually come up with a color palette that I want to use beforehand before I go into creating imagery. And that color palette is going to be used in all of the styling. So deciding what my location is going to be like, what the background is going to be like, what the props are going to look like. I'll always take reference from my color palette because all those things, again, need to agree with the color palette. So let's explore the basic psychology of color. Now, the next thing that we might want to do is think about how we can use this knowledge of color to create a palette and convey certain emotion. So let's have a look at creating color combinations, and I'm going to introduce you to the color wheel. Okay, welcome to Adobe Color. If you have Photoshop or Lightroom, you probably already know the company Adobe. Adobe Color is a free-to-use software that you can access on the web. It's great for exploring new colors, seeing what trends are out there, and putting together a color palette. Now, I'm going to start talking you through different color harmonies. A color harmony is basically a sequence or way of establishing a color palette that we know works. There is a little bit of science behind color theory. I'm going to talk you through that now. So the first we have is analogous. Analogous is where the colors of a color palette are all next to one another in sequence in the color wheel. So you're probably going to recognize some of these color palettes that you've seen before. Orange, yellow, and again, a lighter orange, green, blue through to aqua, a green through to yellow. And the benefit of using this particular color harmony is that it gives a sense of calm, serenity, and order. Now, where the brand that you're working with, those values align with that, it's a fantastic option to go with. Here's an example. The color palette for this image is a harmonious palette. All of the colors are next to one another on the color wheel, and the image has a very calm sense to it. Now, we don't always want calm. Sometimes we want a little bit of contrast and tension. So another option could be to go for complementary. Complementary is where the two colors on the color palette are opposite one another, diametrically opposed on the color wheel. So pink and green, red and green, blue or aqua and orange, yellow and blue. You'll probably have seen these around a lot. That's very good for logo design because they're so high contrast. If we have one of the colors as the foreground, say a product, maybe a yellow banana that we're photographing, and we put it against a blue background, it really pops off. It's a great way to create contrast and draw in attention. An example of these images is this shot here. we've got those teals in the background and teal on the clothing, and then red in his trousers and also throughout the background. There's a strong sense of contrast here. Let's look at a third option, where we might want to create some contrast but have a little bit more complexity to our palette. We know that there's going to be lots of things going on, so that just 2 colors isn't quite enough. Let's try split complementary. Now, split complementary is quite interesting because it offers us 3 different options. And often the way that we want to treat this is we will say, whatever will have a primary color, a secondary color, and an accent. So let's say that I'm going to have a primary color of blue. That'll probably take up about 60% of the color in my image. A secondary color of yellow and an accent color of orange. The yellow about 30% and the accent of about 10%. Now, this approach allows us to create a defined and consistent palette that's able to convey a bit more complexity and emotion. A good example of that is this shot here. The primary color is the blue. The secondary is actually the pink, and the accent is the green. Now, there's probably more green in this image than there is pink, but the reason that it's the accent color is the fact that the pink just has a lot more presence in the image. So we want to use this palette to then go out to help aid the decisions that we make about styling and prop to ensure that we create a cohesive palette across our imagery campaign, all aiding to create a cohesive brand. Let's recap that last section. Color theory helps photographers use color intentionally to evoke emotion, create balance, or tell a visual story. By understanding color theory techniques and psychology, using complementary, analogous, or split complementary color techniques, we can craft a cohesive, emotionally resonant images. And finally, a consistent color palette across our campaign strengthens branding and visual impact.